Hello everyone, and welcome to my talk about virtual reality. My name is Malte Schmidt. I am co-founder of CrazyBunch, a small game studio based here in Hamburg. And we are focusing right now on creating games with virtual reality, and we also have recently released our little VR game, Break a Brick, as one of the very first games for Samsung's virtual reality headset, Samsung Gear VR. So, the talk I'm going to do will be a beginner's talk about virtual reality. It's not going to be a tech talk, rather an introduction to virtual reality I hope everybody understands. So first we want to look at what virtual reality is and how it differs from conventional displays and user perception. Then I'm going to show you some of the most common head-mounted displays and tell you a little bit about their potential. Then I want to talk about the problems associated with virtual reality, like motion sickness or the locomotion and input problem, and how to face these problems and how to overcome them. After that, I'm going to go into the opportunities of virtual reality and how developers can utilize those in order to create new virtual reality experiences. At last, I got a little case study for you. Our VR game Break a Brick is already mentioned, which was released for Samsung Gear VR. Here I want to talk about Break a Brick and what we did to make it a comfortable VR game. And at the very end, I want to draw a conclusion about virtual reality and maybe give a little forecasting of virtual reality's future. So, what is virtual reality? The idea is actually kind of old. Already in the 30s of the 20th century, there were ideas of virtual reality and how it would be to live in a virtual environment. And over the decades, there were quite a lot of scientific approaches to virtual reality. Then the first consumer VR in the 90s with Sega VR and the Nintendo Virtual Boy unfortunately totally flopped. And this was mainly the result of way too high expectations of the consumers and immature technology. The hype died down, and scientifically there was a lot done. And in the era of smartphones, a lucky guy reinvented the whole thing about virtual reality and made it accessible for everyone, and the cards are now being reshuffled. So today we have so many things that are VR related, everybody knows, like The Matrix, the Star Trek holodeck, or even books like Neuromancer or Ready Player One. And especially the recent hype about virtual reality and the Oculus Rift make it actually superfluous to define what virtual reality is, because I think everyone knows. But what is to say is that virtual reality is the ultimate escapist dream. I was completely convinced of virtual reality after my very first experience in early 2014. It was a first-person car park game in which you were driving a car and you could jump over several ramps and loopings. And I was driving over a ramp with medium speed, and in mid-air the car front lowered a bit, and I watched through the left window and saw the ground approaching. And during this time I had tingling feeling in my stomach. And then I asked myself, how can a virtual experience trigger a real effect on my real body? And by this finding I was totally blown away. How does virtual reality work these days? Normally, most commonly the user has a head-mounted display, like an Oculus Rift, for example, and input. In this example I chose the motion controller of Oculus, or the Oculus Touch. And the head-mounted display consists of a smartphone display and lenses which are in front of the display. When looking through the lenses, the display fills a big part of the field of view. In addition to this, each eye got its own image. One image for the left eye, one image for the right eye. So this enables the user to have a stereoscopic view, just like in real life, with a feeling of depth. The HMDs also have head tracking, so whenever you turn your physical head, the image displayed also changes in dependence to the head movement. Via an external camera system, not only the rotation of the HMD can be tracked, but also its position in dependence to the external tracking. Then there are several motion tracking systems which can track, for example, the player's arm or hand movement. This works also with external trackers or motion controllers, and I think the most famous one is, of course, the Wiimote. I think everyone knows this motion controller. Yeah. So there are a lot of HMDs out right now, or being announced recently. And people are quite afraid of market fragmentation right now. But in my opinion, there are 3 or maybe 4 big names that will most probably come out on top. And first, we got the Oculus Rift. The Oculus Rift consumer version has great ergonomics and is, due to its weight and size, super comfortable to wear. It has integrated headphones, which are specifically designed for virtual reality. And this is a very important fact because audio is a really crucial factor of a good virtual reality experience. The Rift consumer version 1 also comes with its own motion controllers, as mentioned, the Oculus Touch, and it has also external positional tracking. And all these aspects give the Rift huge potential for great mass market accessibility. Next comes the Sony Morpheus. Okay, I haven't tried this one out myself, so I cannot say much about ergonomics and quality, but there's to say it's Sony's VR flagship, and it will work with PlayStation 4 and the already existing PS Move controllers. Besides, it looks really fancy, so I think enough said about the Sony Morpheus. Next one is the HTC Vive. I only tested the developer version because I think there is no CV announced yet, or at least not public accessible. So the Vive has really good quality, that's for sure. But it's also quite heavy, it has a lot of cables, and I would say it's at least not as comfy as the Oculus Rift CV1. The Vive has a really good tracking system with 2 external cameras, but you need a lot of space in your apartment for the installation. So I think the Vive is rather something for hardcore virtual reality gamers. The Samsung Gear VR is a mobile solution for VR. It's like a better cardboard where you put your smartphone in. And it has extremely nice quality. At the moment, by far the best mobile virtual reality device. But it also has its downside. Currently just working with Galaxy Note 4 and Galaxy S6 smartphones. So as you see, these HMDs have a lot of different features and use cases. So I think fragmentation isn't a bad thing, it rather brings diversity to all the devices. So if everything is right, we got the right hardware, right content, etc., we can create a perfect illusion. But in order to get there, we have to overcome a lot of problems. And all these problems have to be solved and are going to be solved in the near future. First of all, to mention is motion sickness. I think everyone heard of that already, or maybe even felt motion sick. So what is motion sickness? The motion sickness we have in virtual reality, also called simulator sickness, is caused by emotion that is seen but not felt. So this means that if you move in virtual reality, your virtual avatar will move, but your real body won't. And the brain gets contradictory informations about this, and the player gets sick. And this is because the visual perception is stronger than the vestibular system, and the informations got override. So, and this may cause dizziness, nausea and fatigue. There are a lot of things you can do in order to minimize motion sickness. The hardest way, of course, is just get used to it. But there are other problems then involved there too, because people are different prone to getting motion sick, so this isn't the best choice. Latency is an important factor. The lower the latency, the lower the risk of motion sickness. And also in the beginning of virtual reality, it is important to make the play sessions relatively short. So the user can relax in between the play sessions, and that also minimizes motion sickness greatly. Also avoiding movement like strafing and fast turning is necessary. Those will cause heavy symptoms of motion sickness. As long as there are no affordable, perfect functioning haptic suits or haptic installations, it is extremely important to use clever game design to incorporate motion sickness minimizing aspects to your game. I think really the best way right now is just use clever game design and make your game fun, even with all these now existing constraints. The next big problem is locomotion and input problem. There hasn't been found a good way for moving your avatar in virtual reality yet. How to control your avatar has to be rethinked completely because, as also mentioned in Dependence to Motion Sickness, classical and widely established controls like WASD, mouse, shooter controls won't work anymore because fast movement, strafing, turning, running backwards just feel unrealistic and can cause motion sickness. And I mean, nobody in reality moves like a tank, like we always strafe and running backwards and turn fast. It's just an unrealistic movement which breaks the immersion and causes heavy motion sickness. And additional to this, most FPS controls doesn't separate head movement from body movement. So how to turn and move in virtual reality is a big problem. And it's mostly a design and input problem. There are right now, there are a lot of input options out there, like motion controllers, gamepads, motion sensors like Leap Motion and the Xbox Kinect, or even treadmills which simulate walking. But the right thing or combination haven't been found yet, unfortunately. The next problem is Uncanny Valley. This is a widely known problem, and it's actually not only VR specific. But because virtual reality feels way more immersive, Uncanny Valley is really important for VR. So for example, if you meet such a person or NPC in virtual reality, you would shit your pants, literally. Because the problem is that she is only almost recognizable as human. You think that this is considered to be a human person, but she's slightly off. And the human brain recognizes this, and this makes interaction with such an avatar extremely difficult and unpleasant. Think, for example, of the dumb NPCs in Skyrim. They also every time manage to break the illusion, even in a traditional gaming experience. And it doesn't need to be photorealistic to be believable. Look at Toad, for example. You wouldn't consider him as human, but he's also not uncanny because he's abstract enough. The next problem I'm going to mention is the problem of ergonomics and mass market accessibility. And right now, in order to be an access, VR needs to get as soon as possible a huge potential for the mass market. But there are several problems involved there too. Currently we have a trade-off between game complexity and the amount of hardware needed. So the more complex the game is in its interaction possibilities and gameplay mechanics, the more hardware, as motion sensors and haptics, etc., is needed to make it playable in virtual reality. The problem is that HMDs and a lot of peripheral hardware are still quite expensive and uncomfortable to wear. And for big installations and motion tracking systems, you need a lot of space, as mentioned earlier. Only hardcore gamers will crowd their place with a lot of peripheral hardware. So content and HMDs which work fine even without a huge amount of extra hardware will be more accessible at the beginning. Okay, now we come to the opportunities of virtual reality. We start with presence. And so what exactly is presence? Presence is the feeling of being there, to have physical presence in a virtual environment. So, as in my first experience with virtual reality in the car park, this is presence. When mind and body are convinced that they really are present in the virtual world. And then the virtual world can become the real thing, and that's what presence actually is all about. So how can we achieve presence in virtual reality? Michael Abrash, the chief scientist of Oculus, did a kind of a checklist for technical aspects needed for presence, like low latency, high resolution, high refresh rate, rock solid tracking, wide field of view, etc. But we also need plausible worlds and plausible avatars. I say plausible because, as mentioned with Uncanny, they don't have to be photorealistic. Also low poly or comic graphics can do the trick with presence, as long as it is believable and not uncanny. Together with good haptics and audio, the player is unable from telling apart the real world from the virtual one. And in its peak, it would be a fully 100% immersive virtual reality. So you can ask, why do we need presence? We have the real world, right? And yes, this is true, but there are a lot of things you cannot experience in the real world, or at least not without heavy repercussions. And you cannot experience certain things in traditional gaming, which you can experience in the real world. And VR brings together all these aspects. You can do whatever you want and whenever you want. So, are you afraid of height? Then don't consider doing this, because you get weak on the knees. Or even jump from the skyscraper and fly away. You can also experience what feeling it is to be giant or really tiny. And even things like personal space now work in gaming. Imagine jump scares with zombies right in your face. Possibilities are really unlimited there. And VR applications have a vast field of use. Gaming, of course, social interaction like telepresence, business like teleconferences in virtual environments, training and education. Imagine going to school in virtual reality or attending university. Then, of course, visualization, which is even now already a big thing, like for construction projects. Psychological treatment, so for example, phobia therapy, which is also already in use. And ultimately it will be the replacement of most aspects of the real world, like a second life in virtual reality, with such good graphics that we cannot tell apart the real world from the virtual one, with such good haptics, input and output that we can sense the virtual world with all our senses. There also are very good opportunities for indie devs, because everyone can be an expert right now. VR, as it is right now, is still very new. There are already some best practices and common guidelines, but most of it is still unexplored. Everyone can be a pioneer. There aren't that many games out there yet, so if you have a good idea for a virtual reality game which can work with the current hardware, now is the best time to start with it. VR is a whole new platform, and content is badly needed in order to prove that consumer virtual reality can work. And as we all know, indies can create innovative content and gameplay which AAA studios can't. And because indie devs can commit to something new, AAA studios mostly hold on to their existing IPs rather than committing to a new, still unsecure platform and risking to lose money. And since the market is very small, indies will have great visibility. So now I want to give you a closer look at our Game Break. The game started as a game jam in 2014 and was originally planned to be a small flash game. The game is a 2D action puzzle shooter. You control a cat in a spaceship and you can suck in bricks and shoot them out, kind of a bit like Space Invaders. And at the beginning of 2015 we had the idea to make the game virtual reality. And so, what's the time left? 3 minutes? Yeah, okay, going to do it. So I want to show you a little video. if it does work right now. I don't know. Yes. Or no. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Here I want to show you a video of some of the VR features was integrated in Break-a-Brick as you see. Here we integrated head tracking. With head tracking you can control and select options in the menu. The menu is just text or icons, but rather just optical implemented within the spaceship's HUD. And during the game, you can see the 2D game projected in space, and you can look up in order to see the bricks coming down at your ship. Okay, and now you can probably ask, oh.
Tricky.
Tricky, yeah. Oh, okay, I start from the beginning, I think. And just. Okay, so you could say, why the hell did we do this? And the answer is we showcased Break-a-Brick on several exhibitions, and people really loved the aspect of virtual reality there. Most people there had never experienced virtual reality before, but they highly appreciate the game. We hadn't had a single person that felt motion sick after playing Break-a-Brick. And there were also a few persons which already experienced cyber sickness, and they were pleasantly surprised of Break-a-Brick. What I want to say with this is that we think people may be deterred by an uncomfortable VR experience, and thus scared away from any VR medium. And although we don't utilize heavily on VR features in Break-a-Brick, the game still uses a lot of VR-specific features that are able to convince the player of the fascination of virtual reality and simultaneously introduce the player gently to virtual reality. So now we come to our conclusion. VR, of course, is still at its very beginning, but opposed to the situation in the 90s, we have now the hardware and the knowledge to create content that can convince anyone of virtual reality. And the big hype we have right now will also tail off a bit, of course, because the expectations are too high right now. But it's going to grow, and time will show what VR can accomplish. And if you want to make VR games right now, the most important thing is that you make games that actually work with virtual reality, don't make the player sick and are fun to play in shorter sessions. So minimize motion sickness and maximize presence. And it will take a lot of time to get a perfect illusion with perfect virtual worlds and haptics, but there are already games and applications which do work really great, so I recommend just trying them out. So VR is partially fantasy and partially real, but it will become so real in the near future that it will change our whole world. Yes, that's it. Thank you.